Welcome to another Creative Spin podcast, the podcast that we take creativity from life to business to everything in between, and we have a conversation right here. So today's episode, I sat down with two teachers. I sat right in between them, and I asked them questions about technology and new media and how they integrate that with today's school system and how it all works. Is it working okay? Is it not? Are there little tips and tricks that they can... I'm not going to say anything else. I think you guys have to listen to this one. Hope you guys like it. Hey now. Hello. Hello. All right, so you guys are comfortable with talking about school?
Yeah.
All right. So, welcome to another episode of Creative Spin Podcasts, and today I have Ana and Adrial, the two teachers.
Hi.
Hey, what's going on?
Two teachers here. I'm having my
Don't you love it?
my childhood nightmare is just No, we're good.
I
good.
love it.
So yeah, welcome.
Why nightmare?
Well, you know, as a student, it was the relationship I had with teachers was
I love
interesting. I'm gonna leave it at that. But we're here today to talk about how we can spin the whole educational topic around in regards to how you guys teach in high school, because you're both high school teachers. Forgot to mention that. And I was curious to find out how you are using technology and software to teach your classes. And,
Start Adrial.
Adrial? Okay,
Yeah,
Adrial,
go.
go. Like, how do you see this whole thing of the youth? They seem to be very in tune with technology. It's always around them.
Well, right. I mean, the group that we're dealing with now, I don't think they really have a living memory of a non-digital world, right? I mean, so these guys are born 2000 not even then.
2004 is our grade 9s now.
Right. So
Yeah.
we're looking at 4 through the early 2000s. So when the
Okay.
first
That just made me feel old.
well, that's fair. Yeah, no, that's fair.
So you don't know how we feel. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, the iPhone was 07, wasn't it?
Something like
Thereabouts.
that.
So
Okay.
they don't really have a sense of a world where they don't have that level of connectivity all the time.
That's kind of crazy, guys.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that?
Yes, we do.
Wow. I mean, yeah, you guys must. Keep going.
Well, I mean, it has its benefits, but I think it's also alarming. Like, if you were in your most formative years just being bombarded with media that was relatively superficial, like that can do things to your attention span, to your ability to build a habit for slow, reflective thinking. So it's a bit problematic, but that doesn't mean that you can't use this technology that they're already saturated with and try to channel it for some bigger educational outcomes. Right?
But do you find that the kids are actually utilizing this technology nowadays to their advantage as they could,
Or as they should.
or as they should? Because I have a feeling that they're not. It's almost like they know that all the information is right there at available to them 24/7. So they don't need to use it. It's there, right? Do you feel that in class, in school?
It depends on the student, I think. There are some students that are just curious. And yes, they use it to their advantage. A lot of times they also use it because it's the easy way out. For example, I teach French, and it drives me crazy that every assignment they submit goes through Google Translate.
Oh, the good old Google Translate.
And
It's a dead giveaway, though. Like,
exactly. So how do you do they write in class? Yes, but not every assignment can be written in class. Do I, and this is going back to your question, can I catch that? Yes, because a lot of times they don't even bother to edit. So if they misspell a word in English, that misspelled word in English is in my French paragraph.
Yeah, but would they be able to edit it? I mean, if they're using Google Translate.
Well, an
to
English
begin
word in
with.
the middle of a French paragraph, I think so. But
well, they might think it is a French accent on the word. I don't know.
I don't know. But then there are others that do use it well and do present a lot of research, I guess.
Let's look at the positive side. So let's say I'm a student and French isn't my strong point. So I will use Google Translate to start things off, and then
that's
and then start editing. So
but that's fine. I'm the first one to say that. Use it, but translate words. Do not translate sentences. There's a few ones that became extremely famous, and one of them is in English to get. It has I don't know how many different translations into French. So, for example, there was one dialogue that was being presented in my class where the student was telling the other one, get lost. And they wrote get lost on Google Translate. They didn't have to tell me they did because they came up as obtenir perdu.
Ah bah oui.
And that means nothing. Like, to obtain lost is nothing. So I looked at them and I said, was like Google Translate? Well, it was the first thing that showed up. Of course it was, because it translated get and then
the word lost,
right?
Yeah.
So it did not translate the expression, and there's many others like that.
Let me ask you guys a question. I kind of know the answer, but I have to ask it anyways. Like, is the school system helping these kids nowadays to learn with the new technology that we have, with the new hardware, the new software, the new social platforms, all of that? Is there anything implemented nowadays in schools that are helping kids, evolve in this world? Because this is the world we live in nowadays. I mean, this whole thing of people bashing digital media and phones and internet and all this stuff. And I know we were talking before while we were having dinner that we wouldn't go too dark here, but just to give a little glimpse, is it happening? Is it not? Is it something that you wish that there would be more towards teaching kids the right way with the right technology?
More technology in the classroom, I would say so, yeah.
You could enhance the infrastructure for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, ultimately it's not like technology is inherently problematic or beneficial. It's about how you use it. How you sort of, you're right. So here's this new tool. Whether it's going to benefit you in any serious educational way is going to depend on how you're guided in the use of it. And to ensure that it doesn't sort of take the place of the careful, slow, reflective thinking that is required for some kind of authentic learning experience. Because you can Google like an isolated fact, but you can't Google a sophisticated argument. I mean, it can be someone else's argument, but you can't internalize it just because you got the
critical
text.
Thinking, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like the actual underlying process, intellectual and moral, like you can't have the tech do that for you. So it's more... There's a greater danger with this kind of technology that they just don't even bother to try to develop those skills. So there's more onus on the teacher to try to push them in that direction because they think that they don't have to, or they don't even know what that missing skill is sometimes.
So you find that the school itself, the system itself isn't pushing that way, but it's more about the individual teacher that if he or she is more up to date with what's going on in terms of tech and what's out there, that teacher then takes up that responsibility.
Well, that's ultimately where it happens. But I mean, the board has some sense of, they know what the technological landscape is like and what kids have access to. How much they're going to provide at public expense is one question, but in any case, to sort of encourage you to make use of whatever is provided and try to get the kids to use their own devices for educational purposes too, which you can do by way of Google Classroom or various other apps. So there are ways that you can have their phone be useful in the classroom and not just a thing that's distracting them. But you have to sort of be on top of that, especially since they're so used to using it for distraction.
Exactly.
And you use Google Classroom.
I do.
And you integrate that with the kids. I mean, they're able to use their phones to
in a very
computers, right?
interesting, funny way, I guess. I don't have issues with them using the phone. Because a lot of times the problem is, of course, they're on Snapchat and whatever.
Well, I was just going to ask, what about that big fear that you hear this on any debate? I listen to a lot of talk radio. I don't know why. Because I do. And every single time this topic comes up, there are always parents calling in saying that they're going to get distracted, that they're not going to do their work, that all these apps are going to distract them. It always it's always the same conversation. Do you feel that is the case, or if you keep them busy enough and interested enough,
it's a risk, but it's not inevitable.
Exactly.
Like merely using the technology won't yield distraction. It depends on how much sort of discipline is present in the room and how you are guiding them to use that tech for whatever classroom purpose you have.
Exactly.
Because a lot of these scholars, they even say, hey, listen, you should completely ban phones in the
that's
school.
ridiculous.
You're right, and that's reactionary, and
Yeah.
it comes from not being, I guess, concretely in contact with what it's like to be in a classroom full of these phones. I mean, even if you tried, like, it would be a waste of energy. You'd spend your entire period trying to put the phones out of commission and get nothing else done.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree.
And then
you
what
have to
stops
use
the
it.
child from not falling asleep listening to you?
Because now we're getting into something else, I think, and we've had that conversation before as well. I think that kids nowadays, the youth, they've been brought up with all this technology. Their lives go by a lot quicker in the sense of things are quick for them. They'll go
Well, it's
online.
what Adrial said, right? That they were born into this fast-paced
Exactly.
society.
They'll jump
right?
onto their phone, to their computer. They're playing games at like hyper speeds, and they get to the classroom, and it's almost like
It's Charlie Brown.
Yeah, there's like a time warp.
Yeah.
They're in a different dimension. So, if you guys are not, if you don't use the technology and try to keep up with that rhythm, they're really going to fall asleep. No.
Oh, for sure.
What kind of apps are you using in class?
Well, because of teaching French as a second language, I use Kahoot a lot because it allows me to Kahoot, Kahoot.
We're gonna try to have like a little screen show up somewhere. And,
So it for French, you can use it for anything really, but it's an app that allows you to create a quiz. You can create as many questions as you want, and it's a multiple choice quiz.
Okay.
And so the students have access to it. They can either download the app, and all of them actually have the app because they like it, or they can just go on and play online. And then they get a code, and with that they have access to my particular quiz, and then they just play it. And
so you control everything, all
I
the
do.
questions, all the answers,
Yes,
and then at the end of this, so
I get to see the results. Yeah.
you use your phone to set everything up, and then
I
on
use
their
the
end,
computer. It's easier for me.
or the
But, it
computer,
can be the
but you
phone.
could use your phone,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, anything.
And then they see the questions, they have to answer, and then at the end of all these questions, you can actually
I get a report,
report,
on
right?
how they did, how many they got wrong, and it allows me, it's good feedback to know where I need to focus my attention. So if they all know the present tense, I know I don't need to spend a lot of time teaching the present tense.
Now, do you think that like that kind of app works well? I think for French or languages. Do you
It
think
works
it will
for anything
for
that doesn't
anything?
require the critical thinking, right?
okay.
Just trying to build a memory
Yeah,
base.
that knowledge,
Like to
right?
encode some memory so they've got
Exactly.
quick access to the grammatical information
Yeah.
or coding information, depending on what kind of course you're doing. If it's like just a body of material that you've got to get in there, then that sort of trivia-based approach is really engaging, and it activates their competitiveness, like you were saying
exactly.
earlier.
Yeah.
And that can, as long as it's good natured, that can be really energizing and just
Yeah.
direct their attention. And
But
so
that's
it's like right. So it's like a more sophisticated form of what flashcards used to be when you're just trying to
Exactly.
get stuff in there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And-
but let's say in you teach English now.
Mostly, yeah. Mostly these days, yeah.
Do you feel like that would that kind of app or something similar to that would help in your class?
If it were English as like a second language, then sure. But since at most of the courses I'm teaching is a literary engagement,
That's why.
Yeah,
that
we do.
it's not as relevant,
Do
right?
you have any apps that you use with your kids?
I
or-
haven't found. I found that tech because I'll do some history courses too, and I found that it's more useful there, especially to create like a steady flow and structure of content with a lot of visuals and just sort of rich media to help get these ideas in, rather than just talking about Churchill. You would see a picture of him, hear a recording of him. Like I was going over.
It just becomes more interactive.
Well, right, yeah, just sort of more richer sensory experience. So I was going over the invasion of, or not the invasion, the attack on Pearl Harbor. I was like, okay, I can just pull up YouTube and we can hear the American president declaring war on the Japanese Empire, and the Congress like applauding him for it. So
Exactly.
it gives it this life that you can't, no matter how animated you are at the front of the room, you're not going to replace that experience,
You
right?
can try to act it out.
Sure, you could, and that's fine. But then, and why not? If you've got that in you, then deliver it, and then they can compare it with the recording, and then that adds an extra dimension too. But so
Naughty.
the tech is there to make, especially to make the past live, and to give just a lot more to look at and hear to supplement the basic content that you're having a conversation about. With literature, it's useful to that degree too, but just not as critical, I think, or it hasn't been in my experience. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a role for tech in the literary or in the humanities more generally, outside of history. But it's more immediately obvious to me to use it in a history context.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And since we're talking about this this contrast here of digital versus good old-fashioned books, we were, as we were talking before we sat down here, we were talking about examples of when textbooks could just become something that resides online versus probably spending thousands of dollars in buying textbooks that will be outdated. We were talking about civics which will be outdated next year because politics change, or in the near, at least within the 4-year span. Give me your 2 cents on that. Like, where do you draw the line? Where do you think that it should be already in a digital format, or where it should actually stay? And I'm doing this because you guys kind of teach a little bit different in terms of the subject line. You were mentioning that for, if you want to read Shakespeare,
right?
You want a book.
Yeah, there's some extra value to the tactile experience,
and it's not going to change.
Well, that's it.
And as a reader, I
for sure. Yeah. Like because when you're reading literature, it's something about the drama of the human experience, and to have as many of your senses active and engaging that, I think, is more affecting than just having it on a screen.
Yeah,
right.
100%. But then on your end,
again, if I'm teaching a novel, same thing. I like feeling that, and I have this. I don't know if it's a nasty habit or not, of grabbing a pencil and just writing on the margins my thoughts.
Yeah, we'll leave that up there.
So I could do that on an iPad, obviously, but it just doesn't. It's not the same.
Yeah, it doesn't
thing,
feel right. And I'm speaking from. I love technology, but I kind of always go back to a book.
And I have books on my iPad when I'm traveling. They're awesome.
Yeah, there are moments that fine, it helps. It's there. Why not?
But I do like that feeling. Now, if it's a textbook such as like the civics one or even grammar, I'm okay with it being available online and not having to carry that humongous book all the time. It gets ruined a lot of times. In many cases, out of 20 chapters, I teach 2 or 3 that are relevant to the curriculum. So I see it as a waste of money, where if you have the online access to, then it becomes different because you get,
I honestly, and this is from somebody that's on the outside, I kind of get a feeling that the money that's spent on things like those kind of books that, have to be replaced every so often, I think that money could be easily spent on tech.
Oh, sure.
Oh, for sure.
And actually save money. I think
in the long run.
Yeah, in the long run, you're going to save a lot of money. Yeah. Do you feel like, what's the future of high school or school in general? What's going to happen in 2040?
In terms of budgetary priorities, or just the overall educational experience?
What do you foresee? Because of all of this tech that we have nowadays, will teachers be at home teaching to a class in Africa or Australia, and to many different classes? Because you can. What do you feel about that?
I think there's like an analogy with what we were talking about in terms of print material and online material. So it's more convenient if you have distance learning. You can bring a bunch of other people whose schedules won't align for actually going to the same place at the same time. So that should come in to supplement. But you don't want it to utterly replace the in-person, face-to-face human experience, because that is irreplaceable. And so, as a convenience, the tech can be relied on, but I wouldn't think of it as what's going to replace the live human experience.
Yeah, no, I feel the same.
Feel the same?
Yeah, I do. I do feel though that we need to change
Yeah, a little bit.
I do feel like we need to change the.
Here you go. I'll fix this for you.
Thank you. The tradition, I guess, the traditional setting of the classroom, in terms of, and I do this a lot. I move things around. I don't like the rows and them looking at me, and I think it needs to be more interactive in that sense of, if I don't have a big class, I usually one day it's a U shape if I have time. The desks are like a U shape or a circle, or I just feel.
Are you trying to be creative?
Yeah, I'm trying to give it a creative spin, I guess. But I don't know, Adriel. Any thoughts? I don't know where it's going. I really don't.
The tech, I think, is going to become more prevalent, more normative.
Right.
There's going to be a greater challenge to ensure that the skills of slow, reflective thinking don't get lost in the convenience of technology, and that the tech is there in an ancillary way. It's not replacing the live human experience, and it's not replacing the heavy work of actually internalizing ideas and processing your thoughts. So tech is great as long as it's used wisely. And it'll be more prevalent just because that's the way things are going. And I think there'll be a greater challenge to encourage these sort of slow thinking skills as you see more and more like younger generations who are maybe they don't have as much of an intuition for it because they've been bombarded with sound bites in digital form since consciousness.
Yeah.
Right? And so you get used to just jumping from image to image, media to media, but that doesn't build as much of a habit for sort of slow, reflective thinking. So I think they're going to be at a greater disadvantage as we see these younger kids come up. And I'm already seeing that trend maybe over the last 14 years.
But
because-
the future teachers.
But that's you touched on where I was going. These in 20 years from now, these students of today, they're going to be the teachers. I mean, obviously, you guys are going to still be kicking around and doing some damage
On some level.
at some level. But I kind of predict that because these now kids and then teachers, they're going to bring that upbringing of being online all the time and having information in a different way. I think that ultimately will change the way that they teach. So I think we're going to see a different kind of schooling. I don't know. I kind of predict that we won't see long hours in school like we see today. I think that like a lot of it will be done from school or from home possibly. Just because I kind of feel like commute times are terrible as it is.
Sure.
And in 30 years, unless we get some more automated cars and things get a little bit more organized, it's going to be difficult to move around. I mean, just to go to school is going to be like a whole ordeal. So why wouldn't you just do it from home? I don't know. There's all these little nuances. I don't know what.
You can add convenience, but if you try to have the technological situation utterly replace the human life situation,
No, I wouldn't say all the way.
Yeah.
yeah, no, there's still going to be a core of like
to be a little
lived
bit.
face-to-face experience.
Yes.
Because no tech can substitute for that. Really.
Well,
Like,
we don't know yet.
I
mean,
think
in
we
30
do.
years-
Unless we end up with an AI that is effectively a human person,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
isn't just a sophisticated algorithm. If it's like a full-on person, then
Yeah.
fine.
Capable of thinking.
But at that
yeah,
point,
yeah.
then we're not. I mean, calling it technology would be even maybe like an adequate label for whatever emerges as a person with a technological base.
Well, hopefully we'll be around to
Yeah.
and look back at this recording and see how wrong we were,
There we go.
right?
Yeah, right.
Because
What's it going to be Skynet?
Or maybe right.
It's gonna be gonna go
You know?
beam me up. Let's you just never know. Beam me to school, and
Yeah.
there you go. So now all of a
That I
sudden,
would love.
That'd be
have
great.
to say.
And then you still get the in-person stuff. You just transport to school. It's amazing.
Good. Like,
Yeah,
that would
that
be
I would
that'd
love.
be amazing.
amazing, right? Just beam me up.
And I wouldn't mind
Scotty.
working with data, but
Yeah.
that's a different story.
You show up to your philosophy class and argue whether you're the same person now that you were when you were beamed out of home or you're someone else. It's an opportunity.
Yeah.
It's a teachable moment. I don't know.
So, speaking of, we're obviously talking about Star Trek. For those of you who were a little bit lost in all of this conversation, which you shouldn't, but
That's Adrian's expertise.
That's
Even though I
another-
love Star Trek.
last question is, how well do you guys, do you think teachers are relating to students nowadays? Like, are they living in so much of a different world that you guys can't relate anymore? Or is this a generational thing that always keeps on happening? Because we've seen this before, and I think we'll keep on seeing it. But at what level are we right now between, being able to understand the student in their world, and do you think they understand our world? And when I say ours, the
Sure.
older guys.
Yeah.
What do you feel about that? The silence.
There are huge differences across the generations. It's primarily based
Because
on the
things have
technological.
been moving really fast.
Really fast.
Really fast.
So I think the thing that you can always it takes maybe a bit more work if you don't all have the same frame of reference, or if the generational differences are so vast, it's so hard to connect. What you have to sort of try to get at is the stuff that's always the same, just the situation of being a human in the world, with a set of needs and desires and frustrations, and that's relatable if you're alive. Doesn't matter when you were born and what the tech is.
True.
So if you can drill down to that common universal human element, that's what's going to bind you or connect you to these kids who are otherwise in a totally different world. And all those other differences, as vast as they are kind of secondary. We can all realize we have this same common situation of being people that everyone has.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't forget that you were once who they are now, right? You were once there.
Yeah,
And
but I did mention how quickly things have changed, and I think
Sure.
that even like from our generation to our parents' generation, the gap, even though there was a gap, it wasn't such a big gap. I think the world has evolved so much quicker in the last 10 to 15 years, and you just said it. Your kids now are starting. They were born in 2004,
the green lines, yeah.
so they were brought into this world full of technology already. There was a different world, and look, just think about it. In 2004,
I think
And
it's
now-
also it depends on you as like your interest, right? If I'll give you an example. I love social media, right? And a lot of times when I mention certain things from social media, the first thing that I get out of them is, "Wow, you have an Instagram account."
you have
And-
Snapchat.
And in that, a lot of times I'm like, "Wow, I look that old." But it's really being. I know I am, gosh.
Oh, wow.
I'm here to be insulted.
Yeah.
Listen, you got everything in
so
this
I
podcast.
think that when you can somewhat relate to them and understand their language and sometimes act a bit crazy, like act a bit their age, they will relate to you and they will look up to you.
And that's
then-
not too hard for
and
you,
I
right?
remember, I
mean,
don't know if
that's
Adrial remembers this, but about a year or two ago, maybe more, we had a student, he taught English, I taught French, Marie I think was her name. Adrial and I were talking outside, and she passed by us, and she came with this ritual dance, like my two favorite teachers. Do you remember that?
Oh, okay, yeah. Right.
And she had just, oh my god.
Oh, yeah, Maria, absolutely. Yeah, she was an
Maria?
IB student, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And she's just having this ritual dance around us.
She was having a moment.
She was having a moment. It was a very nice, affectionate gesture.
There
Yeah.
you go. So that says that both Adrial and I connected her somehow.
And I think it's that sort of like common human element, right?
Yeah, there you
Because
go.
there's all these differences in frames of reference and familiarity with technology and, all that stuff. But more fundamental than that is that we're all humans here.
We're all human.
Yeah, they-
All right, guys, this was good. I think we should do it more often. Today we had the pizza and beer night. I think it was a good night, and then having this nice conversation, which
I'll cook again like that.
There you go.
No,
anyway.
I was the one cooking today. Come on,
Oh,
These guys
sorry.
were slaving when I showed up. It was holy crap, man.
crazy. But we're trying. Time is flying, and this was a good conversation.
Yes,
I think it was. I enjoyed it. Hope the audience has enjoyed it as well. Adrial, we'll have to do another podcast.
Absolutely.
We were just talking about it. You know a lot about beer.
I have a decent knowledge of beer, yeah.
Yeah.
And coffee.
And some coffee.
And coffee.
And Shakespeare.
And
Shakespeare, we did some
We'll
philosophy.
shake
And
everything
Star
together.
Wars.
And Star Wars.
We got-
Look at that.
We've got
Look
options.
at the topics.
We've got options.
We've got so many creative options here that, and this is my thing. I want this podcast to be open to any kind of subject, and we'll try to find a creative spin to every single
There you
one of
go.
them. Guys, thank you so much for being here tonight.
My pleasure, thank you.
And again, for you guys at home, continue watching, continue listening to this podcast. Don't forget to download, subscribe, do all the the usual stuff, clicking, sharing, and telling your friends about this podcast.
Can we tell our students?
You can definitely tell your students, unless that student Mary is going to listen to this, and
And then
she's
she'll
going to
she'll pop through that door. Yeah, she'll slide down the stairs and we'll have a dance and a hug in a moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So aside from that, that's it. We're off. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right. We are done.